Hello, everyone. So, as Transgender Day of Remembrance comes to a close, just want to remind folks about the Trans Lifeline, 1-877-565-8860. So we've lost a lot of trans folks this year already, and some of it is from violence, and some of it is from suicide, and so I want to make sure that phone number is out there in case anyone might be struggling with any kind of crisis, but particularly want to make sure people know that there's help out there. So I've done a lot of posts today, mostly to TikTok. I found out TikTok allows you to make GIFs, GIFs. I know people disagree on how to pronounce that, but yeah, GIF. And then, let's see. I did makeup for the show I was at. So you see the wing eyeliner. I had lipstick on, but then I just ate a bunch of dinner, like hung out with people after the show. It was a really good show. I think I might do it again next month because I do it every month. It's called Workshop Wednesdays, and it's once a month. It was great. I had a wonderful time. People were very supportive. I did my spoons act from the double clicks. But I tried a variation where I sang instead of lip syncing, and it was great. So I guess I've been singing and posting and doing all kinds of stuff, but what I'd like to do is read from my book, because I did sell 2 books today, which was sort of unexpected. So I thought, this is like the only book I haven't read at all on my channel, which is weird because it's one of my favorites, and it starts off a whole time travel series. So here we go. The Device by Esther Mathison. Gloria used to live a quiet and peaceful life. Well, that's a lie. She lived a boring and fruitless life, and it seemed all the metaphorical pieces of fruit on all the metaphorical trees always rotted before she could reach them. This all changed, of course, when she built the device. The device was what she called it, as a sort of placeholder for a better name. When you live a boring life, your imagination languishes. She used to have a pretty active imagination, but that part of her brain kind of gave up, so to speak, when it realized there was no hope of any of those dreams could come true. Gloria had become a prisoner of her own low expectations. And was there any reason to give the device a better name? She knew she could never share it with anyone. Well, that's a lie, too. She knew she never would share it with anyone. She'd come up with a convenient self-contained rationalization. She thought, I am responsible enough to handle this power. Other people might not be so responsible. Being responsible is the #1 rule in time travel. She had watched all the films growing up. She knew you shouldn't encounter your past self or go mucking about in your parents' history. Don't go all Oedipal like Marty McFly with his ultra-flashy DeLorean in Back to the Future. What was he trying to prove? Did his ego really need to prove that he was such hot stuff that even his own mother couldn't resist him? Equally bad was visiting the future. Who wants to know what year they will die? And who wants to show up accidentally in the year after several wars had wiped out the human race, leaving you standing alone in a radioactive wasteland? No thanks. When she built the device, it was a bit of an accident. She was researching an alternative to chemotherapy for cancer treatment that would reverse the mutation of the cells. It was necessary to build something large enough for at least one person to fit inside. But when she began testing it, it was clear the reversal somehow went beyond the moment of mutation. And it didn't work at all for cancer treatment, unless you could convince someone to give up smoking or start wearing sunscreen. The device had been good for Gloria's imagination, mostly because she had a lot of practice guessing what might go wrong in any situation. It made her more responsible. It also made her paralyzed with fear sometimes. In her own life, nothing fruitful tended to happen because she preferred to stay locked in her house behind closed doors, hiding. If you never interact with people, you will never disappoint them. She was like the first line of lyrics in the song Cabaret. What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. With the device, she could finally hear music again. Her life practically hummed with it now. It's what made it so hard every time she considered dismantling the device. She'd considered that quite often. It was dangerous. It was seductive. It didn't fit with the decor. It made her worry more than usual. It made her leave her room. So she began working on the counter device. It would still allow her to travel through time. So where did it go? It would still allow her to travel through time, but it would create alternative timelines for every trip and neatly categorize them for her if she ever wished to return to them. This meant that if she did accidentally bump into great-grandma and convince her to give up childbearing, that it would do nothing to change the actual world and the actual present. Every consequence was contained within its own universe. Anything that happened would be as fleeting as a dream. Any mistake would be as fleeting as a nightmare. She still had to be responsible with her own memories. She didn't want to know too much. The future was still off limits. She worried slightly about what these alternate worlds really were. It was reassuring to return to the boring and fruitless real world, which was necessary for a reality check from time to time. It's also where she kept her lab. Someday she might be paranoid enough to create a counter device, and she still had thoughts of destroying both devices and returning to the safe confines of a world where nothing happened. But her counter device needed to be tested. What event was significant enough to be commented on by historians, but small enough to minimize damage if it didn't work? She decided to travel 2 hours into the past, buy a safe deposit box, bolt it to the ground, put all of her loose coins into the safe deposit box, and then lock up everything. She picked a flower just for good measure. When she returned to the present, there was no safe deposit box. There were no bolt marks. The flower was back in her neighbor's yard as if it had never been plucked. Part of this experiment was to see if objects could be removed or left behind. The short answer was no. Her wallet was full of coins again, and the flower she plucked had mysteriously dissolved. When she bought the safe deposit box, she held on to the receipt, which had also dissolved. The man at the store had never seen her before, but that proved nothing. Gloria knew she was forgettable. Even in 2 hours she could be forgotten. She conducted a few other experiments before relaxing a bit more. She had to redefine what it meant to be responsible now. Perhaps some people might take advantage of the situation, free to be a sociopath in worlds where there were no real consequences. They might forget the internal consequences, where evil actions quietly tarnish the soul. Gloria also felt a greater responsibility. Every time she created an alternate timeline, it was like she created another world, full of people who could suffer or feel joy. Was she God in these worlds? If she brought back the formula for a vaccine and saved everyone from an epidemic, they would survive in the alternative timeline. All those people would die in the real timeline, but she had saved them in an alternate world. She might have saved a mass murderer, too, who would then kill a percentage of those people. You could lose your mind if you pondered on it too long. Gloria was good at imagining what could go wrong. Gloria was terrible, however, at imagining what could go right. Chapter 2. Something Goes Right. It should be stated for the record that Gloria didn't hate people. She feared them. Whenever possible, she avoided conversations, and if she happened to be in a conversation, within 50 seconds she felt like a trapped animal nervously plotting her escape. But watching people have conversations was fascinating. When she first started her travels, she never spoke to anyone. She was just observing. She traveled through time like an agoraphobic ghost with expensive taste in curtains. This continued even after she built the counter device. Old habits die hard. Life was still easier when she didn't talk to anyone. The curtains were her favorite part of the device. They were indeed an expensive but necessary condition. They were a bit like a one-way mirror, developed in her lab to be sheer on one side but opaque on the other. If she wanted to, she never needed to leave the device in her travels. It had a chameleon aspect to it, just dull enough to fit into any time period. She couldn't really describe what it looked like on the outside because she didn't go outside unless it was absolutely necessary. Today, it was absolutely necessary. She hated to watch suffering, and she wasn't the type to simply turn her head in the opposite direction. She was a responsible person. There was a moral code and responsibility, even to people in an alternate timeline. But there was something holding her back. In her life, avoiding things was a specialty, so she didn't have practice at confronting the evil in the world. She didn't have practice at confronting the mildly unpleasant either. To be frank, she didn't even know how to approach something most people would consider delightful. He was certainly delightful to look at, although she tried to censor those thoughts, even from her own mind. He was in trouble. There was a hole in his pocket, and all the change was spilling out onto the streets. She didn't know if this man had change to spare or not, but nobody on the streets seemed eager to stop it. To them, free money was its own delightful event. Barbarians. There was internal disagreement happening in her own body. Her feet said no. Her brain said yes. Her fingers nervously twitched. Her mouth frowned. Her guilt gland jumped up and down. Her fear center hid in a dark corner. Her stomach did backflips. She really regretted eating waffles with extra syrup today. She decided to isolate her attention to her mind. Would he die if she did nothing? No. But wait, what if he needs that money for food, rent, or medicine? He might die then. Would she die if she did something? No, because dying of embarrassment was not a real condition. She then decided to think of all the hypothetical situations in which someone could die of embarrassment. Most involved accidents where someone was too distracted to pay attention to that cliff, that truck, that mongoose. You get the idea. The man had almost disappeared from view now. She put on her best invisible face and stepped outside the comfort of the device. Invisible face was not an invention of hers, yet, but rather a state of mind where nobody notices you. She was running now. She comforted herself by imagining she'd become a blur of motion on the edge of vision. She caught up to the man, but wasn't ready to give up the illusion that she was invisible. She was getting embarrassed now, having just stalked a stranger. From running so hard, her face was red, her heart was beating at rapid speed, and her lungs were gasping for air. She also looked down at her feet. Bunny slippers, of course. She would need to make a mental note to bring real shoes on her next trip into the past. That was assuming she ever traveled to the past again. She was pretty sure that this is what dying of embarrassment feels like. She glanced around for a cliff, a truck, or a mongoose. She seemed safer now. Bringing her attention to her surroundings helped her notice yet another embarrassing fact. The man had already begun talking to her, but she was too distracted to notice until now. Who knows how long he had been talking, but it must have been long enough for him to worry, because at this point he was saying, "Are you all right, miss? Miss, are you okay? Can you see me? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need to lie down? Miss, are you all right? Do you need a doctor? Miss? Miss?" She still couldn't talk because her lips were protesting this turn of events. The advanced stages of clinical embarrassment had settled in. She was certain she would die now. She blinked at him. This must have been a slight comfort to him because he started talking a bit more slowly now. "Miss, can you hear me?" She gave him another blink. "Do you need a doctor?" She pondered the whole concept of truly dying of embarrassment, dismissed it as silliness, then shook her head no. He took her hand and kissed it. "My name is Boaz. If you're able to speak, may I be so forward as to inquire your name?" Gloria mentally pictured a device that could turn up the volume on her voice from mute to something slightly louder. She misjudged her volume. It came out rather loud, in fact. "It's Gloria! I don't normally speak this loudly." More embarrassment. Her brain rattled for an excuse. She decided to leave it alone. There might be some merit to life as a mute. Too bad she had already blown her cover. Boaz cheerily prattled at an excited speed. "I am so glad you are not ill, Gloria. I didn't really know what to do. But you have spared me from my ceaseless worry. You seem so out of sorts, So startled. You still look a bit startled. Are you peckish? Do you need something to eat? I'm a gentleman, so it shall be my treat, of course. There is a shop of sweets around the corner, although I suppose one cannot survive on chocolate alone. It's a pity. I think chocolate might be a good remedy for startled women. And men, of course. I did not mean to insult your gender. Times are changing. I have quite a predilection for chocolate myself. Miss? Have I lost you again?" Gloria was lost in thought. She'd never met someone so talkative, and she'd been raised to never interrupt anyone, ever. It wasn't polite. It also wasn't polite to go silent when someone asked you a question. She mustered up some volume. "What was the question?" Too much volume, again. Boaz smiled. "Perhaps I've overwhelmed you. Would you allow me the honor of buying you something with which to eat?" This reminded Gloria of something important. "Your pockets! There's a hole in them! Money spilling everywhere!" She hoped he didn't join her in clinical embarrassment. Another secret part of her brain hoped he would be embarrassed, just so she wouldn't be alone in it. No such luck. He showed no signs of embarrassment. In fact... "Oh, I know. It's part of an experiment, really. I shall tell you more of it later, over lunch. I have another pocket with money to spare. Please let me buy you lunch. You still look like you need a boost of sorts. Also, you were attempting to rescue me. No one else said a word. I appreciate it. Let me thank you. With food. It's what I do." Gloria wondered if he was asking her on a date. Her face was getting warm. She was blushing. Another symptom. Now where was her invisible face when she needed it?